Hello and welcome to this very special episode. Today we have a very special guest in our studio, MP from Regina and candidate for Conservative Leadership, Andrew Scheer. Hello and welcome to our studio.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, we'll talk about your candidate leadership race. We'll talk about your campaign focused on. But first, we would like to know, why did you enter in politics? Because you entered in politics at a very younger age. Why did you enter in politics and why Conservatives?
Well, I was always taught at a very young age that it's best for Canadian citizens to fully be engaged in our process. There are many people around the world who don't have the ability to vote, don't have the right to have a democratic voice in their country, but Canada is one of the strongest democratic traditions in the world, and my parents always taught me to be engaged. If you don't like what's going on, you can do something about it. You can join a political party, you can get active, you can help choose your candidates and leaders of the party. So I joined from a very young age. I found it fascinating, and it was a great way to meet people and to fight for the ideas that you believe in. Mm-hmm. And why the Conservative Party? Well, I believe in strong families, in safe communities. I believe in a more dynamic private sector and a smaller government. And I want to lower taxes and improve individual liberty and freedom. And I thought that the Conservative Party was the best party to fight for those issues.
You are based in Regina and you are one of the youngest candidate in the leadership race. There are 14 candidates in this race. How would you set apart from rest of the candidates?
Well, as you mentioned, I am young, but I do have a lot of experience. I was first elected in 2004, and I was Speaker of the House of Commons. So I believe that our party needs a fresh face, a new approach to how we advocate for our ideas. And what sets me apart is really my approach. It's how we need to build a more inclusive party, how we have to have a more positive message. And there are many candidates that are kind of just talking about the same things that the party has always talked about. And I believe that we need to change our approach. We don't need to change who we are. We don't need to change our policies, because I believe Canadians were very satisfied with Conservative policies, but we lost the last election because our message wasn't resonating with a broader audience of Canadians. Yes. There are many Canadians, whether they were young or new Canadians, that just weren't listening to what we had to say. And I think by changing our approach, by emphasizing the positive impacts and the positive benefits of a Conservative government and Conservative policies, that we can get people to vote for us. And so my whole campaign is about keeping our party united, staying true to our Conservative principles and values, but communicating them in a way that will resonate with Canadians in a more positive way. We have to describe a positive vision for our country based on solid Conservative policies of lower taxes, a smaller government, safe communities, stronger families, and I believe I'm the best candidate to do that.
Okay, we'll come to your focus of the campaign, but there is a debate about Conservatives' policies. It seems everybody agrees economically, but socially they are divided.
There are many things that divide us as Conservatives. You're right. There are some issues that even Conservative members and Conservative MPs can't agree on. But I believe that there's much, much more that we do agree on. And a good leader will find that common ground between all the different kinds of Conservatives. And what I found when I'm talking to Canadians, whatever their background, whether they've been in Canada for many generations or whether or not they've come here more recently, that their values are Conservative values. You know, most new Canadians are hardworking entrepreneurs. They start businesses. They want to be able to grow their businesses, hire more people. They want more money at the end of the month in their pocket, not in Ottawa and government spending. And when you talk to, when you take the time to explain our message, we see that even on social issues, many social issues, people agree with us. They want safer communities. They don't want violent criminals let out into our community to terrorize honest Canadians again and again. My plan is to improve the safety of our streets by making sure that repeat and dangerous offenders face consequences for their crimes. Conservative economic policies often, always have a better impact on social issues. It's better for low-income Canadians to have a Conservative government creating that prosperity. It's better to have a Conservative government that is focused on keeping our borders secure and making sure that people don't take advantage of our system. So even on those issues that sometimes the media, the mainstream media, tries to portray as very divisive, there's a lot of Canadians that agree with our approach.
Okay, let's focus on your campaign. We'll talk about some of the issues that are ongoing in the country. If we talk about refugees, mainly Syrian refugees, they are coming in big numbers in Canada. Many, in thousands, have been brought by the government, but there are many after the change in the US policies, they are entering to the border areas. They are seeking asylums. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, I believe very strongly that we have to have secure borders. The people who are coming illegally into Canada are not fleeing persecution. They're coming from the United States. And I've been to North Dakota, I've been to Vermont and the border states. They're safe places. They're not fleeing persecution. So they're now tying up resources in our refugee system that could be used to help people who are truly vulnerable. People who are still in camps in dangerous areas, or people who aren't even safe in refugee camps around the world. And I believe very strongly that we have to have secure borders. We can't allow people to come in illegally like that. I know people who have family still waiting in refugee camps, who are waiting, playing by the rules, who have followed all the proper processes. And when they see that people are simply crossing the border illegally from a safe country, the United States is safe, they have the same refugee protocols that we do, they get very frustrated. They say that it's not fair. I've met with new Canadians and refugees who say, why does my brother or why does my cousin have to wait longer because people are crossing illegally from a country that's safe? And so I think we have to have a fast-track system. When we catch them coming over the border, we have to return them to the United States very quickly, or their country of origin, if it turns out that they're not legitimate refugees. But we can't have misplaced compassion. We can't look at people crossing illegally and say, okay, well, you know, we'll bend the rules or we'll grant an exception, because that's not fair to the many people who are truly in vulnerable situations around the world.
But along with that fast-track system, do you believe there should be a robust screening process for those who are entering in the country? I
do. I think the security of Canadians has to come first. Canada can absolutely have a generous policy. We have a proud tradition of doing our share for helping vulnerable people when there are violent conflicts around the world. But we have to have the safety of our citizens and our people placed at the forefront. We can't compromise the security of our country because you know, Canadians have a right to know who's coming into our country. So I was very frustrated by the Liberal government in the last year having a political target of 25,000 very, very quickly. I think we're up to about 40,000 now, when there are many, many people suffering around the world. And there are many countries that aren't doing their fair share. You know, there are countries in the area, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, who have not taken any refugees from the conflict, and they should. They should be doing more. They have a similar value system, they have a similar rule of law, similar culture, similar religious background, and Canada can do its share, but we need to make sure that countries in the region are doing their fair share as well.
India is the world's most populous democracy, and at present more than 1 million people from India are residing here in Canada. What do you think about enhancing India-Canada relations and relations with the other Asian democracies?
We have to have a very dynamic and robust relationship with India. It makes sense on so many levels. As you mentioned, we have many, many Canadians who come from India that, you know, many generations, many dynamic relationships. There are people who have businesses that operate both in Canada and India, and the potential for trade is immense. I believe very strongly that we need to focus on improving those trading relationships, making it easier to trade back and forth. Canada exports a lot of agricultural commodities, a lot of natural resource products to India, and we buy a lot from India as well. There's a great opportunity to improve both our economies. And as you mentioned, it's the most populous democracy. We have a lot in common. We have very similar values. We have very similar legal systems and very similar democratic institutions. So we have a lot of commonalities that we can build on. There are some countries that when we try to have trade, we have to work so hard because they have such different systems. But with India, half the work is already done because we have such a common background and similar institutions. So I would, if I become Prime Minister, I have the honor of being elected, I would very much focus on improving and enhancing our relationship with India, both economically, in terms of trade, but also culturally, and making it easier for Canadian families, Indo-Canadian families to travel back and forth, to bring family members over, to have an easier process to get visas, to visit, and all that type of thing. So India would be a huge focus for me. It's an important player in the region. There are some countries in the region that we have more difficult relationships with, but India can play a very important role, not only in terms of economic stability in the Southeast Asian area, but also in terms of security, because India is such a stable country with a vibrant democracy that we can partner with to help address some of those regional concerns as well.
Does that mean you would focus on changing some of the ongoing immigration policies and the trade?
Absolutely. I think we can do a better job. I've talked to many Canadians of Southeast Asian origin, and it's a very family-oriented culture, and they often want to bring parents or grandparents over for the birth of a child,
Yes.
or for a wedding, for a funeral. And I often get phone calls of people who are frustrated because they say, my mother wants to come, she wants to spend a few months, well, the first few months after having a child, or for an important family event, a wedding or a funeral, and the process takes so long that often they miss those important events just because they're waiting on a list. And I don't think that's a very compassionate system to have. I think we need to have a more robust process where it's easier for families to get those visits, to bring their family members over for those important events, and I would certainly work to enhance that as well.
Okay. As we are talking about Canada-India relations, one more thing I would like to focus about. This is the first time, or I think very rarely, we have seen the Indian community taking so much of interest, is being so active in the leadership race, because they are active in elections, because it is said that politics in their blood. But they are active in elections, but this is the first time we are watching Indian community is so active in the leadership race. What would you say about that?
I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a good sign for the Conservative Party that we've been able to attract such a vibrant community. And I've gone to events in the GTA, in Vancouver, in Calgary, where I've met with members of the Indo-Canadian Association, and they are very engaged, and it's great to see they bring a lot of people out, and that's the key to our success in 2019. We have to get a stronger relationship with the Indo-Canadian community here in Canada. We've done a great job in the past. Our previous Conservative government spent a lot of time making sure that we had those open doors, those open lines of communications. And I think anytime any group in Canada, whether it's a cultural group or in a group around an issue, the more engaged you get, the more of an impact you have on politics. So whether it's choosing to make sure that you've got the leader of the party that best reflects your values, that will ensure that that relationship is built upon and improved, or whether it's to fight for policies that are important to the community, it's great to see. It's good for the Indo-Canadian community, and it's good for our party. So it's a win-win.
As you said, you're going to so much of events. Did you got a chance to try Indian food?
Oh yes, it took me a little while. I'm usually not used to some of the spices, and on a couple of occasions, I've my eyes have watered, and I'd have to have some extra yogurt and milk to cool down. But I've certainly developed a taste for it, and I really enjoy it. There's some great restaurants in Brampton. I was at one just last week and ate way too much, and that's one of the hazards of the job is watching how much you're eating. But it's wonderful food. It's opened up my taste to a whole new horizon, and I'm very now when I'm traveling, instead of getting fast food, sometimes I'll say, oh, there's a buffet here. I can go in and try some of my.
We will continue this conversation with you and focus on your campaigning, but after a short break. Coming back to your campaign, you said you have a plan to balance the budget in 2 years. Can you please elaborate on that?
Sure. I think it's very important to have an ambitious target to balance the budget. Right now, the Liberals are running massive deficits that they're not even going to try to balance the budget for years down the road. The Finance Department, independent, non-partisan officials, said that if we don't change something, our budget won't be balanced until 2055. My oldest son, I have 5 children, my oldest son will be 50 the next time the budget is balanced. That's not fair to our children, because we're robbing them of their future prosperity to spend on political projects today. And when I say we, I mean the Liberals. The Conservatives are fighting against that. So I've signed on to the target of balancing the budget in 2 years. It's going to be difficult, but it's hugely important that we do it. The first few $1 billion that Justin Trudeau spent, he spent outside of Canada. Didn't create a single job here at home, and it was funding some of his pet projects around the world. So there's some easy, low-hanging fruit that we can use to balance the budget. And again, we need to grow the economy, because when the economy grows and there's more people working, then there's more revenues coming into the federal government, and we can do that without raising taxes. So it's an ambitious plan, but I think it's very important that we have a leader that holds to that, because if we don't have an ambitious target, it won't get balanced. If we don't do it in 2 and we say to the departments, okay, 5 or 10, they'll never hit it, and we'll be having the same conversation 5, 6, 7 years down the road.
But strong economy requires healthy environment. How would you encourage healthy environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, let me say that the carbon tax is the wrong approach. There are many countries around the world that are abandoning their plans for a carbon tax. We've seen the socialist government in France abandon their plans. Australia has repealed their carbon tax. And of course, President Trump is not going to impose a carbon tax. So if Canada follows through with the Liberal promise and imposes a carbon tax, we're going to see hydro costs go up, we're going to see home heating costs go up, fuel costs go up, which means anything that has to be transported will become more expensive. And the studies show that it has no effect on greenhouse gas emissions. My plan is to use Canadian technology. We've become experts in clean coal and carbon capture, and we can work with countries like India, like China, on exporting our technology to help reduce emissions and clean up some of the coal-powered plants that are coming online around the world. That would be more practical. We would actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we used our Canadian technology and exported it around the world. I also think that too much of the conversation is focused on greenhouse gas emissions. The Conservative government did a lot to improve water quality. We raised the standards on sewage being dumped into rivers. We forced cities to clean up the water before they send it in. We saw the Liberal mayor of Montreal just last year emit millions of liters of raw sewage into the St. Lawrence River. That's not environmentally responsible. So we can help our municipalities with funding to improve their water systems, to make sure that we're not just dumping sewage into the rivers, and that's just as important as clean water is just as important as clean air.
Okay, along with the debate on this carbon tax and environment, there's one more debate going on in the parliament. That's about M103, anti-Islamophobia motion. What's your viewpoint on that?
I've met with many
because
members.
I've heard that you are not going to support that. You're not going to vote in that motion.
That's right. I will vote against that motion. I've met with many people in many different communities, including the Muslim community, who are opposed to this motion. They think that it's divisive politics, it's identity politics that the Liberals are fear-mongering. The preamble of that motion talks about how Canada is increasingly a country full of hatred and fear. That's not true. Your viewers in Canada will know that Canada is one of the safest countries in the world, where we celebrate and we tolerate and we promote our diversity and our multiculturalism. And yes, there are incidences. You know, there are Sikh temples that are attacked or with graffiti. There are Catholic churches, Christian churches. There are Jewish cemeteries that get swastikas spray painted on them. And yes, there are some attacks on Islamic communities as well. All of those should be condemned. But generally, Canada is a very safe space where you don't have to worry about practicing your faith. We have to condemn the actions that do discriminate, but we don't need to fearmonger, and that's what this motion does. The other thing it does is it highlights one particular religion. I believe that all forms of religion should be celebrated and tolerated, and that we shouldn't just pick one to highlight as more important as the others. And there are some legitimate concerns about whether or not this motion will lead to the stifling of free speech, to make it harder to criticize legitimate criticism of the radical interpretations of Islam. Because there are some countries that have passed these kinds of motions, and it has led to a chill, if you will, on legitimate criticisms of some of the more radical aspects. So I've had moderate Muslims tell me, please vote against this motion. This isn't what we want to see. We're Canadians. We don't want to have this identity politics. And yes, we need to stamp out discrimination, and we need to protect religious communities. And I should close with this. We have laws on the books. We have laws against hate speech. We have laws against discrimination. We have human rights legislation that protect people of all faiths. So I believe this motion is just divisive politics, and that's why I'm voting against it.
But does that mean you will focus on reopening of the Office of the Religious Freedom?
Yes, yes. I have stated that I will reopen that. That office did so much good work around the world. There are minority religious communities in many countries that don't have the same rights as the majority faith. And what this office did was it put pressure on governments to ensure that all citizens were treated fairly in each country. It stood up for religious minorities that are being persecuted around the world. And I should remind that the Office of Religious Freedom did not pick any one particular religion. So there are countries where members of the Islamic faith are persecuted against, and the Office of Religious Freedom stood up for those communities as well. It stood up for Christians and Yazidis in the Middle East. It stands up for literally any faith that's being persecuted by a dominant faith in a particular country. It was a great way for Canada to send a signal around the world that it's a fundamental human right to be able to practice your religion. It's not just a right that exists in Canada. It's a natural human right for every human being on the planet.
True. We discussed about your policies, but there are at present 14 candidates running for the leadership race. And What do you think? Why members should vote you?
Well, I believe I have the best ability to keep our party united. There are some candidates that are proposing issues that are divisive, that even our own members don't support. And I believe that if we focus on those, if we try to run election campaigns on those types of issues, that it won't be good for us, and we won't be able to achieve all the things that we do agree on. But more than that, I am talking more about helping families, making it easier to pay for children, the cost of raising children, and ambitious target to balance the debt, balance the budget, and reduce taxes across the board. So I believe I have the best comprehensive plan. It's an achievable plan. I want to lower payroll taxes to make it easier for businesses to hire. I want to make maternity and parental leave benefits tax-free so that when families have children, they get a little bit more support in that crucial first year. And I want to support choice in education. Parents who want better choices for education, I want to support that with tax credits for that as well. So I believe when you compare my policies against any of the other candidates, that I've got the most conservative approach, focused on the types of issues that Conservatives can be united on, and I believe I've got the best ability to bring that message to a broader audience of Canadians, because this leadership race is not just about policies. That's important, but we agree on so much. Most of the candidates agree on most of the issues. The crucial question for members is, who do we want to see on stage fighting Justin Trudeau, bringing our Conservative message to a broader audience of Canadians, and I believe I'm the best choice.
Okay, at the end, I would like to ask, what is the part of your job you like the most and you like the least?
The part I like the most is meeting people. I've got to meet some wonderful people in literally every city that I've been to, and it's great to hear their stories, compare their backgrounds, how they arrived here, what they're doing to contribute to Canadian culture and the economy. I love meeting people. I love visiting, making those connections. I keep in touch with people I've met along the road, and I really do enjoy that. I feel like I've learned so much about Canada and so much about the people that have built this country and continue to contribute to it. The part I like the least are the flights. I don't enjoy flying all that much, and changing planes in the winter when you miss flights and snowstorms affect everything. I'm away from my kids, I'm away from my family. That's the hardest part of this, you know. We try to FaceTime every night and connect.
True.
But
I agree.
Missing my kids is the hardest part.
Yeah. Okay, at the end of the show, would you like to address something to the audience, to the viewers for the membership race?
Yes, thank you. I would encourage you all to join the party. For only $15, you can join the Conservative Party, and you can have a direct say in who becomes the leader and ultimately the next Prime Minister. So if you liked what you've heard today, if you'd like to check out my policies a bit more and learn a bit more about what I'm planning to do, please visit my website at andrewscheer.com. And Scheer is spelled S-C-H-E-E-R. And at andrewscheer.com, you can read my policies and you can join the Conservative Party. And if you do that, you will have a ballot, you will have a vote, and you can help determine who becomes the next Prime Minister of this country.
Thank you so much for coming to our show, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.